Hey folks, welcome back to Failure Retirement. So today I'm going to introduce you to my latest project, the Pike Rice Bankout Wagon replica. Pike bankout wagons have been made for years in the town just a little north of me, deep in the heart of rice country, where they identified a need way back in the day to get the rice out of the muddy paddies. So Pike, that was his last name, don't know his first name, sorry. He developed this rice bank out using some old military axles and maybe even the truck frame in the beginning, I don't know for sure. And it developed over the years, improved it over the years. The later versions have cabs, and I was going to pretty much copy exactly the way he did it, um, using some Dopke wheels. The Dopke wheels I figured are about the right size, similar tread pattern, and I would just scale it around those wheels. Well, here, I don't know, a month or two ago, Mr. and Mrs. Failure were driving down a highway that we don't go on often, maybe half a dozen times a year. And just at the last minute, I happened to see something in a guy's yard that kind of caught my attention. I saw it for a few seconds. And what it looked like to me, dashing by at 70 or whatever, looked like a Pike type bank out with a regular truck cab on the front. So then that just got the wheels turning, right? Hold up. Like Failure's got an extra Smith Miller Mac cab that he doesn't have plans for at the moment. And it's not the best cab, like I might not actually put it on a Smith Miller. It's had some previous repair work done to it, which is okay, but not great. So that just got the wheels to turn, and I have the wheels. I have this truck cab. I'm probably gonna have to fab out the grain box either way. I did look at my Dopke Woldridge dirt hauler and kind of used that as an example, but figured out right away that the box shape and size is just all wrong. It's angled on the top, it's angled on the ends, and this needs to be a much more square box, but needs to be made the same way in my mind that like Dopke would have made it. That's how I try to do my toys. I try to keep them toys. I try to, if I'm going to add something or modify it, I try to do it the way the original manufacturers could have done it, maybe would have done it. And I try to keep them toys. I like the guys' toys that customize and put on the mirrors and the air cleaners and all that stuff. I really enjoy looking at that stuff. I personally don't really have the patience for it, and I want my grandsons to be able to play with it someday. So I don't want them, breaking the mirrors off or something, right? So that's why my stuff is the way it is. Try to keep the patina wherever possible. But back to the Pike bank out. So funny thing is, I talked to a friend of mine and I kind of explained to him, send him a couple pictures of what I'm thinking. He's like, yeah, you're on the right track. And you can always count on Ted for some encouragement, right? So shout out to Ted. Anyway, he said, yeah, Ted's a rice farmer, and he says one of his neighbors actually has one, and they put a cab over truck cab on it, and it's super cool. And so I've never seen this before. So I go back out to where I saw this, and I'm going to take a picture. And as I'm coming up on it on the highway, I realize it's not even what I thought it was to start with. LOL, this is failure's luck. So it just so happened there's a modern day version kind of the Pike bankout that is convertible from spray rig to bankout cart. And so the grain box is hanging there on its hanger, and there's a truck sitting perfectly for about 2 seconds on the highway. Everything lines up perfect, and it looks like it's one deal. And that's what failure saw. So anyway, enough talk. Let me show you what I got so far. And I filmed some of the building, and so I'll show you where I'm at now, and then I'll patch in, edit in some of the other video. Hold up a second. Okay, folks, so here it is, partially deconstructed. So started out with just some 1-inch channel iron for the frame, which honestly is way too heavy, slightly on the big side, but seemed superior to failure fabricating something completely from scratch. And then I kind of spaced off the fact that the Smith Miller Max have like a Z in the frame, and the nose sits a lot lower than the back of the cab. Not real happy with these cuts I made. It was kind of a rush deal and they didn't come out straight, but the bottom line is the cab covers that. Let's slap the cab on here. So the cab covers those cuts, so you can't really see that, so I think I'm going to have to probably learn to live with that. Again, I got the Dopke wheels. The road grader that was in my junkyard video donated its wheels and donated these front spindles, kingpins, donated that. I decided it was easier to fabricate my own tie rod than to rework the Dopke. So yes, we have like semi-working steering. Kind of hoping to get that hooked to a steering wheel in the cab, but we'll see. I may get tired of that. That's kind of a project. The back axle is kind of still a work in progress. I got to get some rod and decide on the final width, or really, get it to match the front width. Really is where we're at. So we get the cab back on here, and then I did some sheet metal work. Well, let me back up. So I made me a pattern, put this in here. Yeah, that looks good. Yeah, okay, that's good. So I make me a box, and I put it in here. Way too tall. Not really happy with that, just way too tall. The box came out pretty decent, but it has a few little issues. And I just went ahead and made it pointy on the bottom, even though the real thing wouldn't be. I'm thinking it's down there in the frame, you're not going to see it, and yet it bothered me. So kind of started back somewhat from scratch, put this box together. It has some of its own issues that I'm going to have to figure out how to fix. But I got my little spot welder out, and I bent up all the sheet metal, and I'm pretty happy with it, especially once I got these ribs on here the way they ought to be. And again, the same way the Dopke Woolbridge, if you look at one of those, has the same little 1/4-inch angle iron sheet metal ribs. Same, and not the exact same spacing, but really, really close. So I'm way happier with this. Height-wise, way happier. I will go ahead and splice in some of the bending here. I may just make a separate video just on the sheet metal bending. So let me hit the pause button. Okay, so you probably can't really see very much here, but we're just trying to line up the scribe mark with the seam in the sheet metal brake so we get our bend in the right spot. So there we go, we got her clamped down. We just need a 90-degree bend here. I like to work her up slow, especially on these shorter ones. That ought to do it, I believe. Unclamp it. Spin it around. Ooh. Got it. She's getting away from me. We got so little sticking out here. If you get it in there too far, it's kind of a trick to get her back out. There we go. Now it's cooperating. Yeah, that looks good. Got to get this really tight. What I was saying before, this little bit sticking out here is so little, you got to clamp it really hard in order to get it to bend up and not just push back. And that's why I go a little bit at a time. Anyway, I'm not an expert on sheet metal, but I have used this brake a time or two, and I'm the one that built the brake in the first place. So I do kind of know how it works. All right. So now we have our seams on the ends made. And what we need to do now is we need to make another bend here. I'll have to stop and figure this part out. I thought I had it figured out, but I don't. But this end needs to come the other direction. And I was riding the fence on what to do first, and I think I might have messed her up. Anyway, I'll be right back with you. Okay, so I don't want this video to get too long, so I'm going to stop here pretty quick. But one of the issues I had is my brake actually bent the metal. My plan is to try to JB weld that back together and sand her out smooth. I'm not sure really why that happened, except that I think I maybe had my brake set a little too tight. Maybe you sheet metal guys, if there's any out there, can comment. It could also be, it didn't happen on this one. Didn't happen at all. But I noticed that it bent a little crooked. And I was also having trouble clamping that in the brake. And then the bends were a little crooked, and I noticed that my brake was adjusted a little crooked. So, my brake, mostly I've used it on 14, 16 gauge. This is 22 gauge. So I adjusted my brake back where it was square and a little tighter at the same time. And I'm just thinking this is either a pretty hard alloy or I had my brake set just a little too tight. So anyway, there we are. That's what we got so far. Again, I don't want this video to be too long. I will have a couple more follow-up videos. One of the next things I got to do here is figure out the unloading auger. And yes, this rear frame is just for now. It'll have to get chopped off once I get the auger figured out. So here's the first try. That's just 1/2 inch EMT conduit. Feel like that's too small. Here's some 3/4 inch. Feel like this is pretty close to the right size. So probably going to go with this 3/4 inch, or I got some other steel tubing in the shop that I believe is just a little bit smaller, so we might go with that. Anyway, that's kind of the next thing here is get this unloading auger figured out. And until then, I'll film what I can there, and we'll see you on the next video. Appreciate you watching. I already said this. We'll see you next time on Failure Retirement.